Jumping back to basketball, who have you pulled from throughout your coaching experience? I know you've worked with Roy Williams, Gene Cady. Are those guys that have influenced you greatly throughout your career?
No question. I would say those two, my high school coach, Virgil Fletcher, who's passed now, those were the three greatest influences in my life. Beyond those guys, I've been influenced by a lot of guys, but my old school influences, Dick Bennett, Tony's father, Bob Knight, who we competed against at Purdue for years and years, Eddie Sutton, just those old icon. I say old, I'm sorry to those guys. Those guys, that generation or two that was older than I was, of coaches that were sort of iconic in my mind, but also, you know, Billy Donovan. He and I are very close friends, and I competed against him for 16 years in the SEC, and Roy a lot. I mean, Roy affected how I run my program probably more than anybody else, and I tell people that I've had a really nice life because of Roy Williams.
Who has impacted you maybe the most on the offensive side?
That's a good question. The honest answer to that question is nobody. I asked, I feel terrible about doing this, but I'm going to name drop here. I asked my buddy Vince Gill one time if he had an endless supply of songs that he could write. And he answered me in this way. He said, yes, I do. He said, I could write a song right now or any point in the day. He said, now it might not be a good song. And he said to me, he said, do you have an endless supply of plays in your brain? And I thought about it, you know, yeah, I do. They're not all good, but I could draw up a play for you anytime you wanted. My brain is wired for offense. It is. And now I hope my teams reflect a good wiring, but that's just how I'm wired. So I see the game, and I'll take from here and take from there. And you know, my last couple of teams at Vanderbilt, I took some of what John Beilein does at Michigan, and I combined it with some stuff that we did when I was at Kansas and some other things. But at the same time, I'm committed to some certain things, and I think my personality in excess would be a real bad thing, because then I wouldn't be married, if you will, to anything. And there are some basics that you'll see on all of my teams, but some of the finer points might change a little bit.
You mentioned in your press conference some of the great Pittsburgh sports history. I have to ask, what is your earliest memory of Pittsburgh? You didn't grow up here, but you seem to know the history quite well.
My earliest memory of Pittsburgh sports was when I was probably 10 or 11 years old, and being amazed at Roberto Clemente throwing a guy out from right field at third base. And I mean, he had a cannon of an arm. And that was sort of my first, because I was a baseball kid growing up, and baseball was my first love. And I didn't get hooked on basketball until I saw Pete Maravich play on TV one day. And then it was like a drug had been shot in my system, and my life changed. But I wanted to be Pete Maravich. That's who I wanted to be. I didn't accomplish that goal, but that's what I wanted. But watching those teams, obviously when I'm 10 or 11 years old, I'm not ever thinking, of course, that I'm going to have a baseball playing son that's going to be a catcher. I loved how Manny Sanguian would get behind the plate and how low he could get to receive pitches from pitchers. Those Steelers teams were awesome. And now I was a little older then, but still, I always admired Chuck Noll's just ability to be calm on the sideline, and Terry Bradshaw would put his forefinger almost on the tip of the football, and he could throw it 60 or 70 yards with the tightest spiral you've ever seen. And I never could quite get that. I tried, but those were all little nuanced things that maybe that's why you become a coach, is because you notice every single little thing. But long answer to a short question, Roberto Clemente was my first.
Well, Coach, we're excited to have you here with the Pitt Panthers. Thanks again.
Thank you very much.